CRO-AM Connections, connecting with Croatian Americans through conversation and events to share our culture. Today in our show, we have Steve Rukavina, President of the National Federation of Croatian Americans Cultural Foundation, and Danica, CFU Lodge 760 out of Philadelphia, PA.
Thank you all for joining us today. Dobro nam došli. Today we're having a conversation with Steve Rukavina, President of the National Federation of Croatian Americans Cultural Foundation, and Danica, CFU Lodge 760 out of Philadelphia, PA. Welcome, Steve.
Thanks, Marty. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's awesome having you on our show. There's lots to talk about with your career, Steve. But I want to talk about how we met. Last year, it was a great event, Croatian American Sports Hall of Fame. I was truly honored to sit on the Pittsburgh Host Committee, chaired by Matt Furjanic Jr. You were the chair of the overall event, and it was a great time. Lots of great stories we heard throughout the evening, and how touched everyone was, not only about the event, Steve, but how their Croatian heritage really resonated with them that weekend. It was an incredible feeling in that room as we listened to people talk about their Croatian heritage. And that's what our show is about. It's really about making these connections, understanding what our heritage is, and what great works we're being accomplished by people like yourself, Steve. And we just want to celebrate that through these podcasts. So there's three parts to our podcast. The first, and most people know who's checked in, but it's for new followers. Three parts. The first is diving into your Croatian heritage, your Croatian roots. Where's your family from? The second part is about the NFCA, your great career and how you got started in the NFCA to that culmination of president. And then to end with your future vision of the NFCA and any upcoming projects, initiatives that you want to celebrate or talk about. Looking forward to the future there. So let's dive in. Let's talk about your Croatian roots, your heritage. Where's your family from?
Thanks, Marty. Well, ja sam Ličan, so my family's from Lika. And I have to start and say that I was so lucky and fortunate that at age 17, my dad took me to Lika to see our relatives.
Wow.
And I fell in love with Croatia. And I have to tell you, the alarm clock for my Rukavina and Ugarkovic relatives was a cow that stuck its head in the window. Honest to God, a cow that stuck its head in the window and started mooing. This is in the 70s, and so you're not talking about alarm clocks and iPhones in Kocka Brdo, a couple kilometers from Perusic in the county of Lika. So I was so lucky to meet so many relatives, and it just has created a passion and enthusiasm for everything Croatian, since the 70s. I have Rukavina, Ugarkovic, and Golic relatives that, all used to live in Lika, and now they're in Dugasela, Zagreb. And I have 4 second cousins in Spišić, Bukovica. And every time I go there, about every 5 years, I have to go to like 6 or 7 homes. It's amazing how much you can eat and drink when you're with your relatives and they keep putting food and drink in front of you. And so the hospitality, as you know, of our Croatian relatives is just unbelievable and amazing and just so special. Yeah. So I had the good fortune of traveling to Croatia 8 times with my father.
Nice.
And so we were always seeing 10, 15, or 20 relatives, or 30 or more if we got from Zagreb, Dugasela to Spišić, Bukovica. And so, to be at a table of my relatives and have my dad, the very serious Croatian Fraternal Union member who knew 100 songs in Croatian, and to see my relatives just in awe when he's singing. And my one cousin says, "Let me open the windows." This was in Spišić, Bukovica. So our Hungarian neighbors can hear us singing now. This was like 1995. And, they couldn't sing those songs, Kukavica Kuka and all those great songs were, I mean, they weren't political, but they were too patriotic from a Croatian perspective. So I've been blessed and so lucky to have traveled to Croatia now 22 times.
Oh, wow.
I count the summer of 2024. And except for a couple quick trips, I'm always seeing relatives, and it's very easy for them to come and see me in Zagreb, or we meet in Dugosello if I don't go to Spisic Bukovica. But that's about every 5 years I get to see my Golic relatives, Mara and Bara and Anna and Nikola, and all their kids and all the rest.
That's great. Now, did your dad speak fluent Croatian? How was his Croatian?
Yes, my dad spoke fluent Croatian to the day he died. You can ask Brother Pezo or Bernadette. And he didn't learn English until he went to American schools in kindergarten.
Oh, wow.
But my dad was the most active Croatian American in Minnesota, president of the United Lodges for the Croatian Fraternal Union, created the Croatian Cultural Society of Minnesota in 1993, the same time we created the NFCA, and he was a delegate 19 years, all the way up until 2011 was his last NFCA convention. 11 times CFU delegate to the quadrennial for CFU. So again, my father was the most active Croatian, and so I was raised to be a proud Croatian. And if I spoke some Croatian growing up, Marty, I'd get $1, or even 50 cents, which was in the 60s. That was good money for a 5-cent orange soda or a Hershey candy bar. Way back when in the 60s.
You sound. I saw a little bit about your father, that he was the president of the Minnesota Croatian. I didn't realize he started the Croatian Cultural Society in Minnesota. That was news.
Yes, he did. He wanted to be a delegate to our NFC, our first convention in St. Louis. And so they brought, I think, 3 delegates to the first convention.
Oh, that's great. And you have, when I was developing the list for, we were looking to send out marketing materials for Sports Hall of Fame. There was a lot of Rukavinas across the states. Are they all family? I mean, there's California and Chicago. They're like, you guys are everywhere. Is that true?
I like to say Rukavina is a prominent Croatian name, but there are quite a few Rukavina families in Lika, and over 100 here in the U.S., and we're probably only related to 8 or 9 of them. But I must say, my Rukavina cousins were an 8 out of 10 of Lou and Martha Rukavina's kids went to Notre Dame, and they decided to have a Rukavina reunion in Chicago, like in 1993, a couple years after independence happened. And we had about 30 different Rukavina families show up. Steve Rukavina won. There was 8 of us that showed up, and we beat Joseph Rukavina, which had 7. But it was funny. My wife's cousin was there at this hotel in Chicago and was trying to call our hotel room. But when there's 8 Steve Rukavinas in the hotel, and the funny thing is, after 4 or 5 folks saying, no, I'm not the Steve Rukavina from Washington, D.C., she got a little frustrated and cussed a little bit. And the 5th Steve Rukavina she called was a priest from Idaho. and she never did get through to us on the phone. Just too many Steve Rukavinas in Chicago for this Rukavina reunion. That's
fabulous. Yeah, it's. I didn't realize it was a common name, but yeah, it's all names everywhere. So let's if there's no more family stories, but we can dive into the NFCA and your career. How's that sound?
Right. And again, I just feel so lucky that I'm able to go to Croatia, and even on this last trip where I was in and out of Zagreb very quickly, I had 10 Golic relatives come to Hotel Antunovic to see me and share a snack and some sodas and such to just keep our family connections going. And with my sister there, Patty, for the first time since 2005, they were just so glad to see another Rukavina coming back since my dad can no longer do that. And so we'll keep this family connected, and probably either this year or next year I'll have to do my every 5 or 6 years trip to Spišić Bukovica too.
Nice. And social media helps out with that. When the last time we were over with my dad, it was like 2018. And we've been over several times, met some family members, and just hooked up with Facebook. And that's, I created a Facebook page before just for family. And it's a great way just to keep in touch and say, hey, happy birthday, how you doing, kind of deal. So that's kind of nice.
Exactly. I had to use Facebook to connect with a few of my cousins in Spišić Bukovica, and I ended up like communicating with the 14-year-old, and she's like, Mr. Rukavina, can I be your translator when you come to our town? I hear your Croatian isn't that good. So this 14-year-old has taken me around, for the first 5 or 6 houses, but she had school the next day. And then the last house had a 12-year-old who spoke perfect English. And
that's true.
And she told me at the end of the night, she goes, I want to be your translator next time you come to Spišić Bukovica.
That's true. Always look for the kids because they're learning English and they want to use it. And so, yeah, we do that a lot too.
Yeah,
Find the kids.
Well, yes, the younger ones do speak English and Croatian, but it's great that they can translate for me with my cousins that don't speak English.
Yeah. And I don't know, I just one more on the family. I don't know if there's a Eva Rukavina in Pula. She's a follower here, and I'm like, oh, I got another Rukavina follower. And so it's like, you guys, I swear, you guys are everywhere. I know it's a common name, but you guys are everywhere, man.
Right. I do have, I think, 5 or 6 Rukavinas on LinkedIn, and I've become friends with them in different ways.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, on to your career. You have I was reading your CV on Aspera. There's a virtual museum for Dalmatian immigration, which I think is hosted on Aspera, and I think it's a college or university in Croatia. And so your CV is long and impressive. I mean, it's just amazing. I don't know if we'll be able to fit everything you've done in your career, your story career here. But there's 2 phrases that really stuck out to me. And I don't want to put you in, I know you're in retirement, but I don't want to put you in NFCA retirement because we need you. But there's 2 phrases that stuck out that really sum up your CV, which I think is important to mention. The first is Croatian-American activist, and the second is citizen diplomat. And I think that really says everything about you. Once we get into your career and hear that, I really think that really sums up. And I think what your father as your mentor would be extremely proud, and probably is, of what you've accomplished over your career. So let's dive into this career of yours, and let's start with the NFCA. What is the NFCA? How'd you get started? And then we'll go through your career.
Okay. Well, thanks. And I still stand on my father's shoulders, who, like I said, really instilled a love for Croatia and helped me really get to know the history, culture, and all the rest, and become a patriot of sorts, and a Croatian-American activist for a long time now.
Yeah.
I have to start and say, though, we started the Croatian Democracy Project in late 1988, and we were the first ones in town, kind of laying the groundwork to promote a free and independent democratic Republic of Croatia, and so we were issuing a couple press releases a month. And then, the war broke out in 1991.
Yeah.
And we were issuing a couple press releases a week from spring and summer through the end of the year until maybe the war was sliding into a ceasefire. So the Croatian Democracy Project and the Croatian American Association, another diaspora association with a lot of Chicago, Cleveland, New York members, were working D.C. In the early 90s. I have to say, my wife says and tells people she forgot I was Croatian, and then the war broke out in 1991, and our phone is ringing off the hook, and I live in the Washington, D.C. area. And so I've been speaking out, standing up, being an advocate for the Croatian-American community and for the Croatian causes in the nation's capital for 35 years now.
Yeah.
And it continues to this day, and I'll be in D.C. next week to meet officials at the State Department, Croatian Embassy, and also with the Central East European Coalition that's doing a lot of work to support Ukraine. So
Well, if I may interrupt you, because you glossed over a bunch, and if I may point out some things that you've done, because I think you're going to head right into the NFCA. Is that right?
Right. Yes.
So if I may, I mean, you became NFCA president in '95, but what you've been doing, you spent a lot, like you said, a lot of time in DC with politics, but you were on a freedom train in '95.
Yes.
You visited Vukovar in '96, right? There's lots of things I want to make sure we get to because there's accomplishments on your list that I want to make sure we highlight. So I'll let you get back to it, but I want to make sure we hit some of those too.
The Freedom Train in 1995. What a magical train ride that was from Zagreb down the Split. First train that ran through that area in 4 years. So the Republic of Croatia was fighting for its life and its independence from 1991 on from a military perspective. Of course, the war came to somewhat of a stalemate with Serbs controlling 30% of Croatia's sovereign territory from eastern Slavonia down the Kanine. And so there was just so much at stake for the Republic of Croatia. Mm-hmm. And the Croatian Fraternal Union was pushing too for a new lobby group that could represent the CFU and the Croatian-American community. I must admit, the Croatian-American Association was a member of the NFCA early on and then broke off. And so there was an effort to really unite all our groups. And then the Croatian-American Association, long story short, just felt we don't want to be part of a national umbrella group. We want to do our own thing. And so we collaborated here and there, but they left our umbrella group a year after they had joined us, after the first convention. So the NFCA, as we were called in the early days, we became a cultural foundation in 2014, was created and had 1,000% support from the CFU. And we had 26 Croatian American groups come to St. Louis for our first convention.
Wow.
In 1994. And I was elected the national treasurer, Marty. And you know, you know what that job can be. And and I was a co-founder with what was called the Croatian Unity Committee with Father Tony Petrusic from the CCU. Bless his soul. What a great guy. And so we got the CCU and the CFU working together, and 25 to 30 other groups in those early 90s, mid 90s. You know, by 2000, 10 or 12 of those groups kind of faded away. But during the war years and throughout the 90s, there was so much interest and enthusiasm by Croatian Americans, you know, all over the country. We used to joke that there was 5 or 6 Croatians in Washington, D.C., and then the war broke out and you would have a meeting and 100 would show up. It was just unbelievable. So there was just such a need for Croatia and Croatian Americans to have a voice and to be very active in Washington, D.C. And I lived there, and thank God for car phones. So I was working in the medical device world, and I could make a lot of phone calls, Marty, driving from Johns Hopkins to Washington Hospital Center or Georgetown and all the rest. So the NFCA just started off with just so much support, and we raised a lot of money throughout the 90s with all the agenda items like helping Croatia get its sovereign territory back and pushing for recognition in 1992. And there was just an endless array of objectives that we would promote. Of course, working for Croatia's ascension into NATO was a 10-year project starting about 1999 to 2009. So that was a serious 10-year project, and that is so geopolitically significant for Croatia to be in NATO. And now U.S. and Croatia are and will be rock solid NATO allies for a long time to come.
Yeah. You happen to be on a plane called Air Force Two.
Yes.
You want to tell us about that story? Because Pretty neat.
Yes, and I just watched a plane land in Andrews Air Force Base with President Carter's casket. In 2000, Bernie Lukatich and I were invited to fly on Air Force Two with Madam Secretary Madeleine Albright. And I have to tell you, I was skiing at the Croatian Fraternal ski weekend, and it was like the Friday before, and I get a call from the White House and said, could you be at Andrews Air Force Base next Thursday to have a trip to Croatia and attend the inauguration of President Stipe Mesić, which is on Saturday. I'm sorry, it actually was on a Friday. So Bernie Lukatich and I got to Andrews Air Force Base at 6 o'clock that Thursday, and we were back there Saturday night at like same time, 48 hours later. But it was one unique, just spectacular flight to Croatia and to be part of the inauguration at St. Mark's Church, and just be part of a few receptions. And all of a sudden you're standing there and there's Václav Havel and all these famous European political leaders there. And so we were lucky. The United States had five representatives when all the other countries from around the world had 3 representatives. But we had a few friends lobby the Croatian government to let them add a couple extra Croatian Americans from the U.S. to join the U.S. delegation. So yes, it was an unbelievably surreal trip. And when you get called into Madam Secretary's private chambers to have a 1-hour discussion, it was, of course, a memory and discussion I'll never forget. So,
two other highlights. Another, you got more NFCA to talk about, but this is just indicative of your career. I think it's stated since 1990, and I know this is like a year old or 2 years old, you raised over 1.5 million for Croatian American projects. That's impressive, Steve. I mean, that's your commitment, your steadfast commitment to Croatian Americans, Croatian American culture. So that's impressive. And in 2018, I never heard of this, but you received the Charter of the Republic of Croatia Award. What is that award?
Well, it was an award that Madam President Kolinda Grabar-Kitarović extended to me, representing the National Federation of Croatian Americans. And Brother Ed Pezo for the CFU and John Kraljic for the Croatian Academy of America all received the award that's given to an organization that has just shown extraordinary, unbelievable commitment to the Republic of Croatia. And so it was wonderful at our 25th anniversary. And we had 440 people there at the Croatian church there near the Lincoln Tunnel with Madam President there to speak and to extend awards to really our organization, this one. It wasn't an individual award to me, and I had to accept it on behalf of our NFCA group.
Yeah. Nice.
So it was wonderful that we were able to celebrate, and with the President of Croatia at our 25th silver anniversary.
Nice. Very impressive. So a little bit more about the NFCA. What does it do? What is the NFCA and what does it do today?
Okay. Well, and just to put it in perspective, to talk about what we did maybe for the first 20 to 22 years.
Sure. Yeah.
And we were more focused on a political agenda because of NATO. Mm-hmm. And there were some, of course, other projects, and so many were based in Washington, D.C. dealing with different treaties and such. So, after Croatia was a NATO member, and again, they're recognized and just in a bilateral sense and a Euro-Atlantic sense, are just a great ally to the European countries and the U.S. Our focus was able to shift a bit. So, for example, the last 10 years, we've seen the NFCA-CF Cultural Foundation go beyond public affairs political agenda to a wide array of philanthropy, again, public affairs, diplomacy, cultural affairs. We're so proud. We're the number one sponsor for Croatia Special Olympics. Mm-hmm. And as you know, we're doing another fundraising drive, and we just passed our goal, and we'll pay for a majority of the expenses for the Croatia Special Olympics Winter World Games delegation of 12 athletes and 8 coaches going to Turin, Italy. Yeah. We'll be represented there by Biljana Lovrinović-Abel, and Judy Zivic will go over for the last few days in the closing ceremony. So it's just a real feather in our cap to have a charity in Croatia that we're connected to and benefits from. And, we had our 10th annual NFCA Croatian-American Croatian Special Olympics floorball tournament this summer, the week that we had 2,000 Croatian Americans in Zagreb for the junior and adult TAM Fest, and had 4 other events this summer too, honoring a heart surgeon who saved over 500 Croatian kids and children from 1993 to 2003, and honoring American airmen on the island of Vis as an 80th anniversary on July 5th. And we had a history series with Marica Hrvatska in Zagreb too, besides the 6 or 7 CFU events. So this past summer, Marty, was
You've been a bit busy. You've been
unbelievably busy, and had a little bit of a slow August before we had to get on a roller coaster for, as you talked about before, the Croatian American Sports Hall of Fame, and to have a 330 sold out banquet with 2 Croatian American gold medalists, and 6 of our inductees are there, standing tall, and just incredible, extraordinary group of Croatian American athletes that made their mark, and it was just one unbelievable weekend in Pittsburgh, and the CFU hosted us, as you know, on Friday night with just a wonderful reception. Of course, Croatian Temero music on Friday and Saturday, and Mass on Sunday at St. Nick's in Millvale. So I just share some of those events and projects from 2024 because they're the type that have just been ongoing. And we've been more involved in some very interesting projects that kind of just walk into our space. And somebody says, can we start donating Croatian art to you, and will you put it on the walls of Croatian museums? And so that project started 6 years ago, and we own about 12 paintings now, and we've donated 3. 2 to MUO Arts and Craft Museum in Zagreb, and 1 to a Zadar Museum. But, somebody contacts us and say, I'm paying to renovate the church on Korčula where I went to as a little girl. Yeah. You manage the project. And then Netta Young added a church on Var with Jelsa. So we managed some Catholic church restorations for 4 years, and it was fun, made a little bit of money. And so the NFCA is one Croatian American group that on a moment's notice can embrace certain projects that it'd be more difficult for the CFU or ACAP or some other groups that have a more strict agenda. So we're a little more flexible to be able to embrace a project. And of course, like all the other groups, we raise money, and we raised over $40,000 through 2 different efforts with earthquake relief.
And it's an all volunteer organization.
Yes. Well, thank you for mentioning that.
Right.
We're all volunteers, except for our 1-a-year Rudy Perpich Fellow and our longtime 25-year public affairs consultant, Joe Foley. All our volunteers, as you know, on the board are volunteers. And so we're not paid a penny for our time. And so, it's really a labor of love. And it's amazing how many Croatian American activists have been part of our NFCA umbrella for 32 years or so. I must say, Ed Pezo and myself are the only 2 Croatian Americans who have been delegates for all 31 conventions. Wow. And Ed likes to mention that, and I'll share it again with the audience because it shows the commitment of Brother Pezo, but also the CFU. So, again, we will continue all our diplomatic efforts in Washington, D.C., involved with NATO projects, pipelines, energy, LNG terminal. Yeah. And so I'm just very honored to have had close to 200 meetings with State Department diplomats and so many meetings in that number with U.S. ambassadors. So I've become good friends with quite a few of the U.S. ambassadors that have been stationed or appointed to that post in Zagreb. So we'll be continuing our work with the Avoidance of Double Taxation Treaty, and a lot of folks think, it's already in effect, and it was signed by the Treasury Department and Croatia's Finance Ministry December 7th of 2023, and has not gotten through the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, though it's stuck in the Treasury Department. The Chile-U.S. treaty got passed the summer of 2023, and the Treasury Department put a hold on it. They want to make a few tweaks to Article 23, some tax dividend issues, and unfortunately, Croatia has to wait until probably the new administration, the Senate, get through some Tax Cut Jobs Act legislation. And I hear the bilateral treaties, like double taxation, may not be a priority until the fall of 2025. So the NFCA will work with the embassy and so many of our groups and ACAP and others to really promote, try and facilitate the passage of what would be the last important bilateral treaty between the U.S. and Croatia. As you know, we got visa waiver approved, and that's very significant. And double taxation is really the last one.
And you're working with a pretty good Croatian caucus too, right? There's some pretty good names there that have been active working with you, Joe, and others, right? Yeah.
Well, yes, and I'm glad you brought that up. And we were a key principal and player to create that Croatian caucus back in 2006. And it's just wonderful to have a caucus that has 25 members of Congress that are part of the Congressional Croatian Caucus and will lend their name to certain letters. We haven't done enough receptions lately because the pandemic, stopped everything. And the last couple of years, we haven't been able to have a major Croatian caucus event, but we're ready. And when the Prime Minister comes to the nation's capital, Finance Minister again, or Foreign Minister, we will have a party on Capitol Hill. And we always draw a nice group of congressional members. And the Senate members aren't part of that caucus, but we have 6 or 7 really good friends in the U.S. Senate that we work closely with. And as I said, Joe Foley, our public affairs consultant, has been with us 25 years. And so he has a great relationship with quite a few Senate and congressional offices. So we have one more important bilateral treaty, and it's not hasn't been sent to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee yet, but we expect to really help facilitate it in a bipartisan way. And as when Croatia was voted into NATO, close to 90 U.S. senators voted for that legislation. It was totally bipartisan, as was the recognition of Croatia back in the early 90s with the U.S. announcement in 1992.
Yeah, lots of great work. So one last tidbit, which I thought was fascinating, for all the Croatians near Philly and Philly Airport. So you were actively engaged in those conversations for that Dubrovnik-Philly flight connection. Is that true?
Well, yes. I mean, we hosted 4 events that week. Now, I didn't, and NFCA didn't create or necessarily make that happen. The decision by American Airlines to fly nonstop from Philly to Dubrovnik, but once they made that decision and announced that, we decided we're going to have an event at the National Constitution Center where Donald Trump and Kamala Harris debated. We had 200 VIPs, and we only had about 40 Croatian Americans that they were the mayor of Philly and all these some county council folks and world affairs people and international folks from the Philly area. So that was really a wonderful opportunity to do an event at Betsy Ross House, the City Tavern. We had 35 of us for private dinner one night. And the Ministry of Tourism from Croatia sent a delegation. Steve Rukavina came on that, and now he's the Minister of Sports and Tourism. And they loved being in Philly for like 4 days. We did a flag raising at City Hall, nice. And it was a really special 4 days, more so Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And then we had to board the flight from Philly to Dubrovnik, and I sat next to Frano Matusic, who's assistant, like Secretary of State for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and a few other friends. So we were very, very lucky that nonstop flight was from Philly to Dubrovnik, 2 World Heritage cities. And Marty, it was like a incredibly successful kind of like decision by American, and all the flights sold out, and they were ready to go to do it all over again in 2020, and had announced they would. And as we all know, mid-March of 2020, the pandemic hit, and those nonstop flights from Philly ended. But as we know, United out of Newark and Delta goes out of JFK. And I just read United will fly through the end of October this year. So instead of cutting it off in early or mid-September, they're going to fly through the last week of October from Newark to Dubrovnik. So folks, you can do that late September, early October trip to Croatia and not have to deal with the bigger crowds. Prices go down a bit. And it's, as you know, Marty, it's still quite beautiful on the Adriatic Sea in late September and early October.
Yeah, it is. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, let's get into the last part. Your future vision of the NFCA, any upcoming events you want to discuss, talk about, share?
Okay. Well, from a short-term 2025 perspective, and we don't have the Croatian American Sports Hall of Fame this year, and I can't promise we'll have Travis Kelce there in 2026. And Bill Belichick now is back to coaching, but we'll have another all-star lineup in 2026, but
Saban's
no Hall of Fame induction ceremony this year. So, as you look to this year, we'll have our usual history series events. We have one coming up on February 9th about Croatian legends. We will have more Special Olympics type events, and we'll be represented in Italy in mid-March. We're going to arrange at least one major 1100th anniversary of the independence of the Kingdom of Croatia. I don't know if you all know, but the Vatican recognized Croatia and King Tomislav in 925. So this year is the 1100th anniversary. Nice. So we'll be doing 1100th anniversary event, whether it's a wine tasting at the embassy or on Capitol Hill, to recognize that milestone anniversary. When I'm over in Croatia this summer, I hope to attend 1100th anniversary by Matica Hrvatska or some of the other groups, which will be very, very special. And again, we'll have our Congressional Caucus try and do an event or two. We have to welcome, roll out the red carpet for Croatian-American Nick Begich from Alaska, who got elected and follows in the footsteps of his great-grandfather, Nick Begich, first Croatian-American congressman ever from Alaska. His uncle, Senator Mark Begich, a good friend, was a U.S. Senator in D.C., representing Alaska for 6 years, a few years back. And we've got the double taxation treaty as our number one political public affairs type initiative. And so that is more the focus for the next 5 or 6 months. The long-term vision for the NFCA is really just to continue to just be an advocate to make a difference for the Croatian American community, within that philanthropy, public affairs, political, diplomatic, and cultural affairs. There are just so many ways and projects that we can embrace and then partner with the CFU, like we do with the Croatian American Sports Hall of Fame, or with ACAP on some events, and some of our other groups from Cleveland to Minnesota to LA and Omaha and Florida and all the rest. So we're just very fortunate that a number of the other groups will come to us with the project and ask us to partner with them. We'll probably do a couple special film showings this year too, and that's always ongoing. And so, I mean, the NFCA, we survived the pandemic, did a lot of Zooms and webinars during that time frame. So we're still alive and kicking. And again, Marty, and you're on our board of directors, but we have so many Croatian-American activists that step up and donate their time to make these projects happen. And it's only through all those volunteer hours that we can really make an impact and continue to embrace so many initiatives.
Steve, on that note, I want to wrap up our show, but before I do that, I think we need to thank your grandfather. We need to thank your father for creating the Croatian American citizen that you are, the diplomat that you are. And you put a quote, you put a line in that Aspera bio. It was a kind of a letter to all Croatians, and I have a quote I pulled out from it because I think it's spot on, and again sums up your view of what you just said about embracing your heritage and not only just embracing it, but do something with it. And here's the quote. Please let me challenge all Croatian Americans that are proud of their heritage and ancestry to find a project to embrace and to go beyond just visiting Croatia as an act of love, right? Go do something is basically, right? It's like, be a Croatian, be proud Croatian American, go do something, right? Don't just talk about it and don't just visit, go do something. And I think that sums up everything you have done in your long, illustrious list of activities for Croatia, Croatian Americans. And I want to thank you. I think we should all thank you for your time spent, because it's a labor of love, but it's a love of your heritage, and you're doing it not for yourself, but for love of country, both countries. And I think that's greatly appreciated, and we just want to thank you for that.
Well, Marty, thank you for those kind comments. And again, we're all in this together, and I always try and challenge some Croatian Americans to go beyond just visiting Croatia or going to a World Cup soccer game. And like I said, find a project, and it's a pleasure to work with so many Croatian Americans like yourself to just rally the community for a good cause. And there's so many of them. So I appreciate and thank you for those compliments and accolades.
Yeah. Well, we're going to wrap up, Steve. Once again, thank you for being on our show. And so we want to wrap up another episode. I want to say thank you. Want to follow to all of our CRO-AM followers for tuning in, and the Filthy 46 Productions for their editing and production expertise. So until next time, Živeli Hrvati, veliki poz I Bog.
Živela Hrvatska. Thank you, Marty.
Thank you, Steve.
Catch our next episode where we sit down for a conversation with two of the executive officers from the Croatian Fraternal Union of America, Ed Pezo and Bernadette Lukatic-Sakaris from the Home Office in Pittsburgh, PA. You can listen to our podcast on Spotify, Apple, and other podcast platforms, along with watching us on our YouTube channel or following us on Facebook and Instagram. Thanks and appreciation to Steve Rukavina for being our guest, Filthy 46 Productions, and as always, our CRO-AM followers.
Follow.